basic contents of what I'm going to present is to emphasize the importance of debt transparency. I think through the course of yesterday and today, that point has been highly emphasized. But you need appropriate tools to be able to achieve debt transparency. You cannot just anyhow present a report. It has to be in a certain format. It has to meet certain criteria and all of that. And in fact, no particular debt office can decide and determine what will meet the requirements. So that's why the tools are very important, very helpful. Okay? Then there are a number of frameworks. We will not go into details, but you need to be aware of them. And some of them, actually, they even have online courses at the IMF portal that you may need to refer to. Even if you are not doing it for an exam, it will be good to go through because the requirements can be very detailed. Then I will discuss the Commonwealth Meridian and DINFAS, which are the two tools used by most of the countries. A few countries, a very handful of countries are using tools that are outside this. They are just like 2 or 3, maybe max 5. But by covering this, I'm hoping during the discussions we'll also discuss with those who are using other tools whether their tools meet this requirement. And I will briefly talk on challenges and policy recommendations in order to make sure you make the maximum use of these tools. Okay. This is not working. Okay. Right. There's a bit of time delay. So, to some extent, the objectives, in a way, were already explained in the contents. The outcomes are going to be a bit challenging because I'm aware that there is a mix of participants. Some are directly involved with the debt management office where these tools are, and some are not. And so, I hope during the discussions, those who are from outside will try to clarify and understand what these tools actually do and how do they meet the transparency requirements. Okay. Now, I already indicated the frameworks in the contents. It's very important because these standards that are required of your reports are established by world bodies, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. They have a mandate, basically, from the global community to ensure that these standards are established and are adhered to. So, for instance, the core principle, which is accurate, timely, and comprehensive debt data, is a prerequisite for sound policy making, market confidence, and sustainable development. So, by meeting these standards, you are addressing all the stakeholders, the donors and creditors. They need to know that you are meeting these standards as set out. And also within the country, even the general civil society, they want to know that you are meeting these standards. But there is an additional benefit in following these standards, which is that if you are opaque or you are not managing your debt properly, the information is not accurate and all of that, you are more likely to have difficulty meeting your debt management requirements in terms of debt service and also reporting. So if you fail, the consequences can be severe And that's why some countries are in debt distress, because you have to make sure your resources match your debts and that you are always solvent and you make payments on time. Okay? However, we know that in Africa there are some challenges. Rising national debt, complex financial instruments, and a lack of transparency. Sometimes it's just from one government to another. And so we have to make sure we are able to overcome these challenges and also meet the requirements. Okay, now I won't be going into every detail because some of them actually have been touched upon earlier. But we have 4 items. Debtor reporting system, which is established by the World Bank. It allows you to report on a regular basis, okay? So that once you fulfill that requirement of reporting on your loans, loan by loan, then you will be transparent with regard to those loans. There are other requirements, but that at least will go a long way. Then you need to do regular DSAs using the Debt Sustainability Framework. That was already explained by my colleague, Madam Hajia. The third one is the DEMPA. This is actually a more detailed diagnostic tool that is actually marked almost like an exam. And you get A, B, C, D, D being failure. So it's important, and it's a very rigorous tool. It's quite demanding. You need some training for that. Then public sector debt statistics. This is the 4th item, which allows you to define various items that you are going to publish. Okay, like I said, you need special tools. What are these tools? I think most of you here, especially those who work in the debt management department, you will be familiar with DINFAS from UNCTAD. Then a few countries, maybe 1/3 of the group, are using Meridian, which originally was being done by CSDRMS. They provide specialized way of recording, monitoring, and reporting on all public debt. Some even allow for recording private debt as well. So you need, obviously, to have comprehensive capacity building in order to achieve this. And this, the Commonwealth Secretariat for Meridian and DINFAS, UNCTAD for DINFAS, they provide capacity building on a regular basis. And they have even strategic advisory services to back up. As indicated, these tools try to do a lot of detailed work, but it took quite some time for them to achieve that. For instance, until 2019, the Commonwealth countries were being serviced by CSDRMS, which I was involved in for a few years in London while it was being developed. That's the CSDRMS itself. Okay, now I'm involved with supporting the Meridian, which is the successor. The key element there, the difference between the CSDRMS and the Meridian is that the Meridian is web-based, which allows you to work almost from anywhere, so long as you can have internet connectivity. And it is workflow-driven, which means that it tries to take you from negotiating the loan, entering the loan, and managing the loan. It also allows you to integrate with your other financial systems in the government under IFMIS, different names in different situations. They do actually make sure, that is Meridian, that you are able to provide the necessary information for the reporting requirements that I indicated earlier. For DRS, DSF, DEMPA, and for the QEEDS, PSDS. All of them, they are, if you go, they have special templates. And in our discussion later, what we will want to bring out of the group is the challenges you face, whether these tools are doing adequate job and you also know how to use them, because that's where your capacity training needs will come from. We want to go into those details. Okay, I do have examples, but I won't go into that because, in fact, I think only Somalia here is in this workshop. So they have indicated that by using these tools, they were able to enjoy some benefits. And I think those tools have actually proven themselves. DINFAS also, well, in fact, I think DINFAS even has a longer pedigree. Even though CSDRMA started around 1985, DINFAS started in 1982. And a new version, version 7, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. When I was involved with DINFAS, it was still moving from 5 to 6. Now they have version 7, which was released last year. They also meticulously provide ways to link to output data to meet the requirements for DRS reporting, QDS, and QPSDS. So in the meetings we are going to have after this presentation, I would want people to indicate to what extent these tools are actually satisfactory. I know much more about Meridian, but maybe in the discussion there will be others who know about DINFAS. In any case, it will be useful to communicate to ADB if there are certain shortcomings that you think need to be addressed. Okay, so like what I have had here is to indicate that like DINFAS make sure that they cover contingent liabilities in detail. Now, you know, it's not really necessary to record the contingent liabilities in detail, but you need to indicate where there are contingent liabilities. So even though your total debt will not include contingent liabilities, you need to include that in your reporting. Okay, as Madam Hadia had said earlier, you extract data from these tools, and then you can do your MTDS and other reporting requirements to ensure that you can show that your debt is sustainable. Okay, I also try to give a few examples of countries that are using. These are not necessarily like the ones that are using it best, but they have indicated to what extent this tool has actually helped them. Guinea, Mauritania, Zambia. Okay, in fact, these challenges are what we would want to bring out during the breakout session. So that, I mean, I think even as an observer or participant in this workshop, two things really stand out that we have to face directly. And to be honest, I don't think it is an easy solution, because a lot of the time, the difficulty comes from you can call it management, even if it is political, but actually it's often that there is a disconnect. Even when management sometimes want to achieve the objectives of transparency because of their conflicting situation. They cannot help but sometimes try to cut corners and so forth. So to me, political will is the greatest challenge. And then, of course, capacity. One element of capacity that I always point out is the fact that maybe after 5 years, somebody comes in as a junior staff, they are trained many times, and then, of course, either they move to the private sector, they even go abroad for their masters, and then new staff come. And then you almost have to start all over again with capacity building. So I think a point was made yesterday that you need continuous capacity building. Obviously, you shouldn't just be attending the same courses, but you should be enhanced. But new staff should be trained. Don't expect that new staff simply will learn on the job on their own, right? Although I do explain to the debt management departments that at some level you should have in-house capacity to train others. They don't have to go to workshops in order to learn. When you are showing a junior staff what to do, you need to explain in detail, maybe give them some of the materials you have to read so that they become empowered. Okay? In a way, as we always expect, as each of us want to move on, you don't want to become indispensable. So you need to train. So capacity building has many aspects. Okay, so maybe I will spend the last few minutes here because that's where we want to make sure that government takes note and implement certain policies. Do I still have 5 minutes? Yes. Okay, good. Right, because I have divided the policy recommendations into 3. Short-term policies, medium-term policies, and long-term policies. Because the short-term ones are like, you can say, the easy pickings. Okay? Now, they are not necessarily simple. It's just that you don't have any excuses. It's a matter of setting up a procedure, for instance, to make sure that you enact and enforce a comprehensive public debt management law. Okay? And you have a centralized and publicly accessible debt database. Fairly straightforward. Okay? Now, when there is a requirement to okay. No, actually, I do have an effort to try to identify people before we go. But if I finish, I will do that. But if I don't, we have agreed with the IT that we can do some of this. We are preparing for the breakout session so that we make sure that we know who is using DINFAS, who is using CSDRMS, who is using Meridian. I have maybe 90% of that information, but there are some gray areas that we just need to iron out. Okay, but since you have given me, because to some extent it is these policy recommendations that I want to emphasize. So I will take my time a bit. And of course, people are going to ask questions before we go into the breakout, so that any of these areas that they want to either make suggestions or ask questions, I will be able to elaborate. Okay, so I already said we need a database. That goes without saying. Almost every country does that. That's a question of the quality of that database. You also want to make sure that all your relevant instruments are captured. Now, it's a bit difficult to understand. No, I will change it. It's not difficult to understand why some loans get missed out. If you have bad arrangements within the country, where, for instance, the chief executive will take upon himself or herself, when they go on a foreign tour, to simply agree alone with people. In fact, some people come and lobby them to acquire loans. I think it is happening less now, but it has happened in the past, okay, where a loan will come. The only time the debt management unit will be aware of it is when the debt service kicks in. Even they may not be aware of even disbursements, right? Which is bad. I mean, I'm hoping that that doesn't happen nowadays. But in my long career, I have actually been in debt management offices where this is happening. The documents for the instrument are not readily available, and disbursements that are taking place in various agencies, especially grants, they will come without the knowledge of the debt management unit. So these things can happen, but I hope that is now, this idea of bringing in civil society is actually one of the kind of new movements. The press and civil society should be engaged so that when you publish your DSA, it should be something you can extract a summary and publish. Okay. Right. So medium-term policies. The idea of separating short-term, medium-term, and long-term, that the short-term, as I said, is a bit of time issue because something that you can do within 1 or 2 years is short-term. But it's more like the challenge is not that difficult to implement because fairly straightforward. Okay? However, medium-term policies, you need to build robust systems and capacity, and it takes a lot of effort and concentration. Okay? For instance, to do IFMIS, which provides for integration, is probably the most difficult. I had occasion to make a presentation on it, and those countries that are doing IFMIS and you have challenges during the breakout session, please bring them up so that we can discuss. Because if you are not able to integrate, there is double work, double entry, and even incompatible entries. You are entering something in the debt management system, and you are entering something different in the IFMIS system or related tools. So you need to have an integration where you only enter information in one place, and there is consistency. Okay, so you can output information from debt management tool, and you can also input from the IFMIS system. Because if the accountant and all of that, they have made the payment, you can now get that information uploaded into the debt management tool. You don't have to, again, manually go and enter it, and because it also becomes tedious. Now, best practice, really, this is where I hope the African Development Bank, I know IMF and World Bank, they do that. You need to sensitize the senior management in government that best practice should be adopted. And sometimes that best practice means employing the right people in the debt management unit. I have seen a situation, actually not at national level, but at a, say, subnational level, where somebody will come into the debt management unit, they don't know how to use Excel. Now, how can somebody who doesn't know how to use Excel work with figures and so forth, right? So they are just like ordinary, they are physically there, but of no great use. So you have to have best practice, and sometimes, like I'm just indicating, the best practice can be something simple. Okay? Now, this big point I had discussed earlier this morning, question of domestic revenue mobilization. I would say In fact, I just indicated there must be some hierarchy of priorities. Domestic revenue mobilization, I will put it up there. Because if you don't have the revenue or your budget, and I will make my favorite point here. Last year's budget said $100 million. You are going to collect revenue for $100 million, but you manage only to collect 50 million. But then the next budget, you say you are going to collect 200 million, totally ignoring the experience you just had of your previous budget. So your budget must be realistic. Your revenue mobilization, of course, if you plan to improve your revenue collection, you can factor that in, but you have to make sure you deliver. If not, from year to year, you have a shortfall. Then, obviously, it's difficult. Sometimes, even when you prioritize debt service, you may not have the money to pay. And then you start cutting corners or rushing to borrow short-term debt. So long-term policies, here now, really is where you meet the big challenges. Because, you see, it's easier said than done to say invest in a cadre of professional debt managers. Nice to say. But first of all, actually, if you think about it, who are the professional debt managers? By the time Madam Hajia had become very seasoned professional, she retires, right? So you have to have an arrangement where new staff, competent staff come in, they are trained, they are developed by the older staff, okay, and motivated as well to stay, so that by the time the older staff are leaving, the newer staff are now experienced and seasoned professional debt managers. Because what tends to happen is, I've seen it so many times, the people who are competent, for whatever reason, sometimes it may just be accident, there is a war or something, they leave. The people who are left are not confident. So they will not say they are not able to do something and seek help. By what it will mean that there is the work to maintain the database and produce relevant reports and do DSA, they are kind of left until there is a crisis. And then, of course, maybe they bring somebody in 1 month and the person will do their best, and the problem just continues on and on and on. So having that view to have professional debt managers is key, but it takes time. It takes effort. It takes concentration. Now, technology is what we are saying. To some extent, this one, technology, so long as you make sure you acquire the right tools and people are trained on it and developed and you get the right support, you can achieve that. Okay? Now, debt transparency, I think the reason it is an important point here long term is that debt transparency doesn't only depend on the debt management unit. Debt transparency involves various other arms of government. And so you must have a mechanism in which all the stakeholders are involved and they appreciate the importance of debt transparency. Okay? Now, some of these are recommendations or suggestions, like regional peer learning and accountability mechanisms. I know that there was a kind of program, big political program in Africa, that kind of countries will be checking each other. It was meant to do with good governance and all of that, but we should think of it also in terms of, say, debt management. If a country has gone through a process and they have succeeded, other countries should be able to go to that country and learn and kind of then bring home a way to explain. I was in one country one time, and a team from that country went to another country and spent 2 weeks. When they came back, they were energized. Because, you see, when you are used to certain things within your environment, you miss certain things. But when you go and you see how another country is operating, how they are applying themselves to regular work, not leaving things to the last minute, they then come back, they are fired up, and they can perform better. Okay? Now, I think this is a suggestion that has been floated, the idea of having an independent fiscal institution. I can attest to that with regard to the DMO. Within Nigeria, just my own subjective assessment, DMO will rank one of the most professional institutions in the country. Because when you are within the civil service, where the habit of coming to work is at 10 and leaving at 1 or 2, is normal. But the DMO, they come at 8 and they leave sometimes 5, 6, even work late, even work over the weekends. And that's because, I don't know if Madam Hajia would agree with me, maybe they have a bit of financial incentive, because I find that within the DMO, people I knew 15 years ago, they are still there. And that's because they must have some motivation somehow to remain there. Okay, you can see that's the end of my presentation. Okay, yeah, great. In fact, maybe I can even use my memory. I don't have to do, yes.
I'm saying you check and we will update it from here.
Okay, yes. Okay. But, excuse me, can I scroll down? No, you will scroll down, okay. So each country, first of all, if the name of your country is not here, you let me know, you alert me, I will add it. I think 1 or 2, because the number of transition states is 22, and I have 22 here, but over the past 3 to 5 years, the list has changed, so I might have mixed up. I think this is the correct list now. So while we're on this page, is there any country that can see that their information is misrepresented, whether you are using DINFAS or Meridian? Any country that can see something that is not right? Anybody? Okay, so I think up to that. Okay, so in a way, not that much more. Oh, Sierra Leone, yes. I was just told that, are you using Meridian? Okay, so change it to yes. And yes, okay. At some point, Sierra Leone used another tool, right? Maybe experiment. No, yeah, I knew you I was there many times to support on CSRM, but I was told that you used another time. Maybe, I remember, I think IMF was, maybe when when your system was at the central bank, they might have played with the idea of using another tool, right? But anyway, so we got, but yeah. Everybody is happy with their country, what is showing there? Okay, the idea of this table is that we are going to give each country a copy. So when you go to your breakout session, you will now indicate in the space provided what kind of challenges. Because one of the things I have personal experience, when you are in that breakout session, to record everything, it's a bit haphazard. So hopefully, this one will be a bit more accurate. You indicate on your, during the discussion, of course, you explain the problem so everybody can share, but you indicate if your country is facing challenges. And I can say for Meridian that some countries, for some reason, the information doesn't come out exactly the way they want. And some of it can be the system, which then they can update the system later, but it sometimes is because you are using the wrong version. So make sure you are using the right version of Meridian. So I don't see anybody saying no to anything. You are happy with your classification, whether you are using DINFAS or you are using the countries that are actually not using DINFAS or Meridian. Like in South Africa, they have their own proprietary system, but obviously they are not here, although they are represented by, yes, but you are not a participant in the workshop. So, so South Africa, which other country? I know Mauritius is using Meridian, so I'm talking of countries that are not here. Most countries, for instance, does anybody know which system Egypt is using? I think they are using DINFAS, right? I know Sudan was thinking of CSDR Meridian, but I think eventually they were using. Okay, so we are happy. Yes?
Okay. Moi, c'est Madame Zara Kaoumi, du ministère de l'Économie et des Finances, de la Direction générale du Trésor, à la Direction générale du Trésor et de la comptabilité publique. Le système qui est utilisé pour la gestion de la dette dans notre entité, c'est la version 6 du SIGAD. C'est ça qui vient d'être installé. SIGAD, ce n'est pas d'en face.
Niger, c'est DINFAS ou non?
Bonjour. Oui, c'est Mélia Ismaël Souma de la Guinée-Conakry. Nous utilisons SIGAD.
Okay, so let's give a round of applause to Dr. Aitika and Madame Ajia. Great, great. So we go to the Q&A. Yeah, so we'll take some first round of questions, and then we can take the second round as well. The questions relating to the sessions which they presented on. So, any questions?
Merci de la question. Je tiens également à remercier les présentateurs pour ces présentations aussi riches. Ma question s'adresse à Madame qui a présenté donc les outils pour l'analyse de la viabilité, pour l'outil pour la stratégie de gestion de la dette et pour le plan annuel de financement. On a très bien compris qu'avec l'outil qui a été mis en place par la Banque mondiale au FMI dans le cadre de l'analyse de la viabilité, il y a les indicateurs de viabilité et il y a les indicateurs de liquidité et de solvabilité qui ont été présentés. Mais bon, moi, c'est un des défis que je peux constater parce qu'avec cet outil, il présente les indicateurs de liquidité et de solvabilité qui sont beaucoup plus basés sur la dette extérieure. Mais au regard actuellement du portefeuille de la dette de certains des États, beaucoup plus c'est la dette intérieure qui fait défaut. En certains moments, cet outil-là ne donne pas ces rations sur l'aspect de liquidité et de solvabilité. Ne trouvez pas que c'est un des défis qui permettrait donc aux gestionnaires de la dette d'analyser donc l'aspect de liquidité et de solvabilité par rapport à la dette intérieure. Parce que beaucoup plus, cet outil de l'analyse de la viabilité, il donne uniquement l'indicateur aspect global sur la dette publique, la portée sur le PIB. C'est ça ma question que je trouve en termes de défis par rapport à cet outil qui a été présenté, qui a été développé par la Banque mondiale et le FMI dans le cadre de l'analyse de la viabilité. Merci.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I didn't clearly hear your name. Could you say it again?
Moi, je m'appelle Étienne Ndikoumana, je suis du Burundi, le directeur de la dette et de la trésorerie.
Oui, merci. Moi, c'est Mayana Assia Victor, de la nationalité tchadienne. Avant, j'étais au ministère des Finances. Maintenant, je suis à l'Assemblée nationale comme directeur chargé de contrôle budget. En fait, qui dit transparence, dit confiance, dit fiabilité des informations. Bon, la politique, elle est différente par rapport aux techniques. Je voulais juste savoir, parfois, les informations qui se sont passées par rapport aux négociations de dette ne sont pas fiables. C'est-à-dire, on peut contracter des dettes avec des informations qui ne respectent pas les textes administratifs ou juridiques en vigueur. Et parfois, dans certains pays, même les audits des dettes internes, les informations ne sont pas publiées. Et je voulais demander un conseil, comme vous êtes outillé dans ça, je me demande si, en termes de transparence, si vous voulez publier des informations relatives peut-être aux dettes antérieures pour être dans la norme de la transparence, étant donné que le chef de département est contre cette publication. Comment vous pouvez peut-être le convaincre pour qu'il s'adhère à votre explication? Parce que ce sont des négociations antérieures qui ne respectaient pas le cadre juridique ou administratif. Et les textes, le nouveau texte exige maintenant qu'il faut des publications qui vous permettra peut-être d'avoir des points à bénéficier des financements. Donc, juste savoir ça. Comment vous pouvez convaincre votre chef, étant donné qu'il est resté focus sur la non-publication des informations confidentielles?
Thank you very much for the question from Burundi. You see that the indicators focus on external debt. What we normally say in my country is that what the IMF and the World Bank is doing is like they want to keep the borrowers, the debtors alive so that you can pay your debt. The debt that concerns these international organizations are actually the external debt, not much of domestic at the beginning. But now, if you look at the indicators that I showed, we have total debt to GDP indicated there. That total debt to GDP comprises of external and domestic. But having said that, in Nigeria, what we did, just taking into consideration the point you've made, which is very valid, our domestic debt was growing at a rate that is too astronomical. What we did is that on our own, the DMO Nigeria, we sat down to formulate these debt body indicators for domestic debt. We look at our external debt and domestic debt, and based on our GDP, we use the ratio that was used to derive at those thresholds. We use it to extrapolate and now derive for domestic, so that in the DMO Nigeria, we had internally a domestic debt to GDP ratio, domestic debt to revenue ratio. We had it internally. So what you can do is to maybe copy that, because what we have in the public domain addresses more of external. And if you sit back and you are just relying on that, your domestic debt may be going overboard without you taking cognizance of that. This is what we did in DMO Nigeria to address that specific concern. The other question is from Togo. The relationship between DSA MTDS and annual borrowing plan. I'm sure you're going to have the presentation. The detail is in that table, which I was not able to go through. But the relationship is that one depends on the other. The DSA, which is talking about sustainability of your debt, drives the MTDS. When an MTDS is being formulated, it has to look at the debt ceiling derived from the DSA, the borrowing sources, the future borrowings that were input into the DSA before you can formulate your debt management strategy. When you formulate a debt management strategy, before you can do an annual borrowing plan, you have to go back to the strategy to look at what are the sources, where are you going to borrow from in terms of domestic and external, short-term, long-term, currency composition, and other things. You have to look at the MTDS. So the three of them are interrelated. One is derived from the other, and the output of one is the input of the other. Output of DSA goes into MTDS as an input, and the output of MTDS goes into annual borrowing plan. I think that's what I can say. But if you are able to get to that table on my presentation, you will see more. You'll be able to look at it in more details. I also emphasize that the MTDS and DSA, the tool that is used, were developed by the IMF World Bank, whereas the annual borrowing plan is tailor-made. Tailor-made means you design your own according to your own peculiarities. Thank you.
Okay, I will answer the transparency question. I think, in a way, I'll divide the answer into two. If there is a new law trying to improve transparency, usually that's because already past information was not transparent. And that means sometimes the information is not even available. For example, this instrument document, the signed instrument, in many situations, nobody can even trace the agreement. So, but then it becomes very relevant when they say there is a debt restructuring, which means that when there is a dispute, or the press gets to know that, oh, they thought the debt portfolio of the country was 50 million. Now they are told it is 70. Sometimes they can't have the information to justify because they only rely on what the creditors say. So that's one aspect of the question. The real issue is when there is a requirement for transparency. It often conflicts with a usual approach of the civil service to be secretive, or in fact, sometimes it doesn't even require to be secretive. They just are reluctant to provide information. So sometimes you go there and they tell you you have to get the approval of, say, the minister before you can get some information, right? Now, I think there must be some things that are secret. For instance, I think most countries, they don't publish information on their instruments to purchase weapons or the military. Most countries I know, that information is not in the database. But people use the general approach of the government for secrecy to cover everything. I think this is where the debt management office should play a role, because if you are publishing your DSA, you have to be able to justify every aspect of the DSA, even though the DSA is in summary, it's not loan by loan, right? However, you provide information to the World Bank, IMF, on various things, DEMPA and QPSDS, the quarterly information, and some information is loan by loan. So that information is available. And so if maybe the reporters may need access, but if one department that within the government wants information, that information should be available. I think you will have to approach it country by country, but you must stand your ground to say this information should be publicly available, that is at least within the government, right? Maybe the press, when they come, they need some specific regulation or some specific approval to be given information. I think my colleague will probably be able to, because I'm sure they have experienced those kind of questions from the press.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think in publishing debt data, I think what he mentioned that do you publish past debt data? Do you make it available? You find out that some information are not, I'll use the word palatable. You don't want the press, the public to know some things about your debt. And what you do is you manage it in such a way that, like he said, you ensure that within the government that information is available. Because if you give it to the press, they misinterpret and they do their own analysis and come with something that is different. For a long time in our own debt offices, you find out that each time we release any debt data, we have to now start looking for ways to we are ready to justify all the information, all the figures that we have released, because the press has picked it up and they are having their own analysis, their own interpretation. I think it's, if your principal says, don't release debt data, no matter what, you don't release it. You cannot, my colleague was saying you insist, you cannot go and insist when the head of the, maybe the Minister of Finance or even the directive from the presidency to say, don't release this information. You cannot release it, because if you do, you are putting yourself in a more difficult situation. We've had cases where you look at the data, you print the report, even you as a debt officer, you look at it, what we are looking at, they are not good. You go back, we will not release it. We will release the last one, which are okay, waiting for some fundamentals to change that can make the new figure to be better. That is the reality. Thank you.
It's actually a challenge that I've come across many times. The press will receive some report last year, say June, based on exchange rates at the time. And then they receive a similar report this year. The exchange rate maybe has doubled. That is, the local currency has depreciated significantly. And they see the same loan, the amount has changed so much. They wonder, how come the government has borrowed so much more in such a short time? And some will understand, but some in the press don't understand. I mean, you would think it is obvious, but they may not understand. So that may be one reason that government debt departments are hesitant. I will even address another aspect of it, which is audit. I think almost every debt department I have gone around the world has problem with the auditors, internal auditors, not external. Because for some reason, the auditors think the debt management system is an accounting system. Because in an accounting system, there is a trace of everything. Every adjustment is indicated, right? But in the debt management situation, the figures don't necessarily reflect exactly, because there is often information behind the figures that you see that may not be in the normal way that a banking system, accounting system will flow. So they will want to see sometimes that things are like that. And even when you explain many times, they may just not agree. So because of that, debt managers become a bit reluctant to share some of the raw information. They just want to give an overview to say, and then they explain verbally what has gone in, but which may not convince the internal auditors. I've seen that many times.
Thank you for the questions. Maybe I can take just one more question quickly. Otherwise, all the other questions, if you have, they can be discussed in the breakout sessions, which we are going into after this. So one quick question. Okay, looks like there is no question. That's wonderful. Do you have any last words you'd like to say? 1 minute each.
Okay, one
yeah,
minute.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
I think, I hope next year when there is an event like this, whether I'm here or not, but next year I hope there should be some improvement with regard to this issue of capacity building, because I hear it almost all the time. It's as if it is, I think you have to have within the department, the government, your minister or the head of the department, you will ask you, what are your capacity requirements? Don't think of it only in terms of how you get some more income, but you actually identify your capacity gaps, because that, to me, is why almost all the time there is capacity issue. You need to prioritize that you have training, and there is training at different levels. There is training within the department. Senior staff will train junior staff. Then you go out as well to go and train in different fora. And then you also have training with regard to specific tools like MTDS. And if you are doing that, and you have also, you need to be hungry for knowledge. You need to be hungry for knowledge. Like this MTDS that has just been explained. If you just come for a 1 week workshop or 2 weeks, sometimes it's not enough. You have to go and practice. Okay, I think that would be my last word.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. And for me, the last word is that these debt management tools, DSA, MTDS, and annual borrowing plan, as debt managers, let's try to make it as practical as is possible. Don't look at all the theories behind it in case you want to deploy. If you want to go and read all the books from the IMF and the World Bank's website, you may not be able to get to where you want to what you want to do. Apart from the tool, at the end of every quarter for the debt offices, when your debt reports are released, take the debt stock, divide it by your GDP, which you have obtained from your from the other, maybe from the Bureau of Statistics or from budget office. Divide it and you get a figure. Take your debt stock, divide it by export. Take debt stock, divide it by revenue. It will give you an idea of where you are on a quarterly basis. In that case, you are trying to be practical. It's very simple. Use Excel to arrive at this. But you cannot publish this It's just for your own internal consumption, so that you understand the concepts of DSA. If you now go to DSA and you are seeing the variables and the tables, you'll be able to know what we are talking about. In terms of MTDS, I've also told you, look at strategies, maybe about 3 strategies. Make it practical. Strategy 1 is where we are. 2, where do you want to go? 3, another variation. You can do it in your own debt office without going for using the analytical tools, so that you'll be able to understand the concept. It is when you understand the concept, then you now go for training that it will sink in. That's just my advice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tuka and Madam Ajia.